Hello, everyone. Uh, Before I begin, I wanted to make a few disclaimers. Uh, English isn't my national language, so my pronunciation may not be perfect. Uh, However, I'll be displaying my essay here uh, together with me reading it out loud. So if you don't understand me sometimes, you can just try to follow the text or something. Uh, but I'll try my best to sound to sound good so that you guys understand me. Uh, I know I could it would be better if I just spoke it spontaneously instead of reading it. But as you can probably hear, I am not very good with talking straight from my head. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy this essay. I've put a lot of work into writing it and now into reading it out loud for you. So yeah, I hope you can at least leave some comments or something. I'm really curious about what people think about my analysis of Junko Enoshima. Alright, so let's begin. Today I want to talk about Enoshima Junko, particularly about how throughout the whole series she constantly keeps falling more and more into madness and despair, instead of being on the same level of mentally screwed, which many people seem not to notice. From Danganronpa 3 through Danganronpa 0 and Ultra Despair Girls, up to Danganronpa 1, Danganronpa Eve, and to some extent even to Danganronpa 2 as an AI Junko. Her mental state becomes worse and worse. She's not the same amount of crazy in all of the parts of the story. It is also related to her giant escapism tendencies, and in fact, it's kind of a tragic cycle. Junko escapes from painful, dull, and unjust reality by doing evil stuff, but the evil stuff she does make things worse and cause her to escape even farther from her sense of guilt, sadness, fear, morality, etc. She then does even worse stuff as a tool of escapism, and it goes into an endless cycle of despair. I really believe that deep down she's extremely caring, emotional, tender, loving, and empathetic, but she just hides it really well. Disclaimer: this essay is not an attempt of justifying Junko's evil deeds. It's just an analysis, not a defense of her character. Alright, so let's start with the statement that Junko repeats often, that I want to shoot a huge rough bullet at and yell, "Sore wa chigauzo." Mainly, despair is unpredictable. Even before Izuru had his iconic monologue, let's see which is truly unpredictable, hope or despair. I had the same train of thoughts as him, and seeing it in the series only assured me that my thoughts were right. Despair is completely predictable. Sorry. Despair is completely predictable. Illogical? Sure, but predictable. If it wasn't, there wouldn't be so many psychology books, etc. Junko also knows it is predictable perfectly well, and in fact shows it to us countless of times. The motives in the killing games, the orchestration of the whole tragedy, together with the Toa City incidents, the student council killing game in Danganronpa 0, manipulation of Mitarai in Danganronpa 3, I could state many more examples of the things that show how Junko was able to perfectly predict despair to a smallest detail. The thing she cannot predict, however, is hope. Every time people snap out of despair and become hopeful, she acts shocked as well as extremely emotional. She is angry, triggered, and desperate to prove them wrong. Just like a narcissist who is confronted with their lies. So, why does she lie to herself? Well, it's a form of escapism too. I said causing despair is her main way of escapism, and I will show it later. But to cause despair, she has to at least partially escape from her sense of guilt and other negative emotions. So, telling herself everything except despair is predictable and boring, and that she has to cause despair to escape her boredom, is a form of self-justification, thus escapism. But wait, does Junko really feel guilt, sadness, fear, and all that because of her actions? She did so many terrible things. There's no way she is a softie inside, right? Well, let me shoot another truth bullet at you. Junko is in fact very soft, emotional, caring, just, and tender. She hides it really well, but it's visible in a couple of scenes. For example, her falling in love with Matsuda, or her saying how much she loves Class 78 during the 1-6 class trial, or her short conversation with Mukuro in Danganronpa Eve, when she shows herself on the monitor instead of talking through Monokuma, or even her actually putting the bodies of Class 78 in the biolab with full respect, instead of like burning them or throwing them away or destroying them even further or something else. The other thing is her giant artistic tendencies. Aside from the fashion thing, we see her doing all sorts of artworks throughout the series, even as a little kid in Matsuda's memories. And artists tend to be very soft and emotional after all. It's not a main argument though, just a little cherry on top of the cake. But yeah, Junko actually cares. A lot. If she didn't, she wouldn't feel all the despair she inflicts onto herself by doing horrible things, right? I hate how people in the fandom take her for a heartless maniac without any sense of guilt. And let me repeat here, Junko being soft and caring doesn't justify her actions. I don't say she did nothing wrong, all right. Oh, sorry. Now to her main form of escapism. We don't know much about Junko's childhood, except for that it was horrible by Mukuro's judgment. Mukuro also tells us that Junko started to find joy in feeling despair because of how much she felt it, and it should be clear that it was a form of escapism for her as a child. Who knows? Maybe even she developed a philosophy similar to Nagito's. Despair leads to hope, but forgot about it and got left with a despair fetish or something like that. Let's call it despair fetish. However, the next thing Mukuro says seems to be a lie or a misunderstanding on her side. Mukuro says that Junko wanted to share the joy of despair with the others, which is clearly not true. Junko doesn't care if others find despair pleasant, and we see it countless of times. She is purely sadistic towards others, not even trying to talk anyone into the love for despair. She even goes as far as to abuse corpse in the prologue of Danganronpa Zero, which clearly shows her pure sadism, because corpse cannot feel the joy of despair, obviously. She does it not to share despair, but to inflict despair onto herself. Despair in the form of guilt, fear, and other emotions. But why do I say indulging in her fetish is a twisted form of escapism, especially considering that what she would escape from is the same thing she does to escape? I mean, it may have been used as an escapism in her childhood, but it doesn't necessarily mean it goes on throughout her entire life, right? First and foremost, let's look into Junko's huge escapism tendencies in general. She is the type of person who instantly runs away without thinking when things get difficult for her. Whether it's abusing Mukuro whenever she compliments her or says something awkward, or pretending to be Monokuma when Mukuro wanted to talk things out in Danganronpa Eve, turning things into jokes very often, cutting conversations off, or her multiple personality thing. I know she said she does it to fight boredom, but I am pretty sure it's a lie too, or at least escapism being half of the reason why she switches characters. After all, most of the times she does it, it's when the conversation becomes inconvenient, painful, or embarrassing for her. And there are many different examples as well. Hell, when preparing the Ryoko Otonashi notebook, she even called herself the ultimate runner in it, which can be interpreted as an ultimate escapist. I think it was a little psychological hint from the authors towards us to be able to see her escapism tendencies more clearly, but without giving the answer to us on a silver plate. And yeah, talking about Ryoko Otonashi, I'm pretty sure erasing her memories was more than the means to inflicting despair on herself, or even more than attempt to escape from all the sorry. And yeah, talking about Ryoko Otonashi, I'm pretty sure erasing her memories was more than the means to inflicting despair on herself or just hiding from everyone who looked for her. It was an attempt to escape from all the horrible things she did, from all the guilt, doubt, sadness, etc., and trying to forget all about the tragedy. She wanted to rest for a moment because she couldn't take it. You can clearly see that in the Danganronpa Zero scene when, after regaining her memories early, she's talking with Matsuda while looking reflectively at the parade behind the window. Anyways, the point is, she has gigantic escapism tendencies. Next, let's compare her despair fetish to alcoholism or any other addiction. You know, most of the times people drink because their lives are hopeless, because they cannot fit into society, or surprisingly, often they even drink to forget they have drinking problems. I think Junko fits very well into this picture as someone who supposedly had it tough since childhood, who doesn't fit the society at all, and who clearly suffocates in the world created by normies for normies. Like all hyper intelligent people do. Junko is someone who clearly is addicted to her despair fetish and who, in my opinion, hates her addiction. And just like an alcoholic drinking because he wants to forget what they drink, Junko causes despair to escape from the hatred for her despair fetish. You know what I mean, right? Come to think of it, it's always been funny how Junko sounds so similar to the word junkie. Okay, now with all this covered, let's analyze Junko's biography with the focus of her mental state getting worse and worse, and her despair addiction becoming stronger and stronger. I've already mentioned her unclear childhood though, so I'll start with her early teenage years when she became the ultimate fashionista. There's not much to say about it, to be honest, but I have some deeper thoughts nevertheless. First, why did she even decide to go into the world of fashion, considering she was artistically talented in so many different ways, like painting, interior architecture, sand building, and more? It seems kinda off to me, considering that a hyper-intellectual and emotional person like her should feel extremely unfitting into such environment, right? I mean, there are some single intellectual individuals in the fashion world, but the overall society is rather simple-minded, shallow, and cruel, right? Well, I think she chose that path just because of that, wanting to inflict despair onto herself. Together with uh, this, together with her destroying the Sand Cathedral and the scene when she tries killing Mukuro with screwdriver, despite knowing perfectly well it won't work, we can see that her despair fetish was much less drastic back in the day. It wasn't harmful for anyone but herself, I think. The other thing I'd like to point out is that she probably mastered her manipulation, intimidation, charisma, and all while living in the fashion industry world. I mean, those are crowded with egoistic, cruel, fake, and very ambitious people, while at the same time, fashion stars need to learn how to gain the mass popularity and all. So I think her years as the ultimate fashionista were actually crucial for all the evil plots she pulled out in the future. That being said, probably 99% of people in her surroundings were what some may call human garbage. So this probably made her view of the whole humanity very negative too. But it's just my guess. Next, we see her getting into Hope's Peak, where her mental state starts its drastic downfall. At the beginning of Danganronpa 3 anime, she certainly isn't half as crazy as she is in the last episode and later in the story. Sorry. She doesn't do her multiple persona thing. She doesn't harm people much in comparison to her later deeds. And we very often see her put on that devilish bully smile when she does something wrong, like a child who has put spicy sauce into someone's food. She puts that expression on a lot at the beginning of the anime, while later on in Danganronpa 3, she completely stops showing it, even though it's the same anime series. The first very evil, ruthless thing we see her do is the curry feeding scene, and that's more or less the moment when her downfall becomes very fast and drastic. This is the point in the story when she has just discovered the dark side of the school and is in the middle of discovering all the details. I think for someone as smart, emotional, fragile, and empathetic as her, it must have been extremely difficult to the point where she would want to escape from the reality by indulging in her despair fetish much more drastically than ever before. Thus, the Caris scene. At the same time, it was obvious she wouldn't stop until she learned the whole truth. That's just the kind of person she is. Meeting Izuru Kamukura for the first time was very complex emotionally for Junko. It probably was the first time she met someone who was as bored and depressed as her, which must have made her truly happy. But at the same time, thinking about how Hinata was lobotomized into Izuru must have made her feel very bad, especially since she could somewhat relate to Izuru. But then again, The despair she felt both from Izuru's story and from learning the darkest secrets of Hope's Peak must have tweaked her despair fetish like hell. That is probably why, despite Matsuda still being alive, she felt so attached to Izuru, jokingly flirting with him and all. I believe meeting Izuru made her want to destroy Hope's Peak, not just for the sake of despair, but also because of pure hatred for it. That's when she made up her mind and started preparations for the worst incident in the school history. Since that moment, she not only had determination to do all the evil, ruthless things despite guilt, but also needed to indulge more into her despair fetish if she wanted to escape the reality. Events like the curry feeding scene became the norm for her, especially since she probably couldn't forget how much despair she felt doing that. Just like an alcoholic who needs to drink more and more with time to feel satisfied. That's why, from that point, murders, gore tortures, and all became normal for her. She wouldn't be satisfied by the kind of stuff she did before. Like like going into fashion world or destroying her artworks or trying to kill Mukuro, knowing perfectly well that she won't do it. Of course, that meant her mental state became much worse too. Soon after, another important event takes place, one that had a gigantic influence on Junko, I believe, mainly creating the Despair Brainwash video. And yeah, I know many of you consider this plot a retcon, but I've already made another post explaining why I think it was planned from the very beginning. You don't have to agree with me on that, but I will continue this analysis with the thought that the brainwashing was part of Danganronpa ever since Danganronpa 1, Trigger Happy Havoc. Thank you. But why do I even mention that? Because what many people don't realize, Junko was brainwashed by the video herself. In fact, it probably had the biggest effect on her. I mean, think about it. When you create a video, you have to watch it countless times, and Junko created not one, but many videos with the try and error method. So it's only natural that she got brainwashed a lot. Even if you say it doesn't work like that, do you think a despair junkie like Junko wouldn't purposely brainwash herself with those videos when she already completed them? Despite, you can clearly see the effects of it in the anime. Ever since Mikan got brainwashed into worshipping Junko, the ultimate fashionista herself is much more self-centered and basically treated herself like a goddess. And it's not just an ego boost from Mikan worshipping her. The change in her behavior was too huge, in my opinion. At that time, we also see her doing another personality thing for the first time. And do you really think it's a coincidence that she starts doing that exactly after trying to create a brainwash video? I mean, I know I said it's one of her ways of escapism before, but those things don't exclude each other. Sorry. This can still be used by her for the sake of escapism, while also being an after effect of brainwashing, and maybe effect of the mental downfalls she had suffered recently. And when Mitarai helped her create the proper despair video, she became brainwashed even further, raising her craving for despair onto another level and making her not able to resist her fetish even if she actually tried to. Another argument behind that is the hypnotic eyes she had in the final moments of Danganronpa 1. They were exactly the very same eyes we see the brainwashed people have in the anime. Junko was clearly brainwashed, despite it not being openly told to us. That is what I believe. You may not agree with me, but I think I am free to believe that. I believe the things she does until the end of Danganronpa 3 made her fall down even further. In the last episode, her psyche is already in shambles. She's completely lost to despair. The brainwashing may have worked differently on her though, since she was already brainwashed by failed videos, just like Mikan was a little different from other remnants even after watching the proper video. Then we have Danganronpa 0. As I said before, I believe the whole Ryoko Tonashi plot was not only made for the sake of despair, but also a form of escapism for Junko. She needed some rest, some normality, and a hard reset after all her brain went through in the first part of Danganronpa 3. However, wouldn't you suspect that having your memories erased every day and all would have some side effects, especially on someone whose brain was already one big, despairfully destroyed mess? That is why, in the epilogue of Danganronpa 0, as well as in the latter points of the series, she seems to be even more far gone than what we see at the end of Danganronpa 3. Of course, killing Matsuda and other mind-fucking things she went through in Danganronpa 0 also must have messed her up even further. I cannot imagine how screwed up her brain was at that point. Witnessing the tragedy at its fullest and preparing the killing game must have been extremely tough on her psyche too, of course, as well as what she did in Towa City. I believe turning to children was another attempt of escaping for her, even if temporarily. But of course, brainwashed and addicted as she was, it's obvious she messed things up and fell even lower. I mean, everything she did in Towa City is a completely new low in my opinion. I am not strongly convinced about it, but that may have been the time when Monokuma became a crucial part of her. yet another form of escapism. I mean, Monokuma is very strongly connected to the events of Towa City, and it clearly is tied to Junko, much more than her other personalities. You can especially see that in Danganronpa Eve, sorry, but even Trigger Happy Havoc shows that very well. Acting as Monokuma clearly helps her go through all the further traumatic events. Junko basically turns off when she's Monokuma, so she doesn't suffer then. I mean, it's not split personality like with Genocide Jack, but just getting very, very, very deep into role-playing. That's why she stuck to the personality for so very long, even when she was already exposed in 1/6 trial, and that is why Monokuma doesn't change personalities as often as Junko does. That is why Monokuma is so stubbornly insisting that he is a real bear instead of someone controlling him and all that. Of course, it doesn't mean the events she experienced through Monokuma's eyes don't affect Junko at all. Killing Mukuro, watching the whole killing game and all, it's the final nail into the coffin of her mentality. I don't think Junko we see in the final of Trigger Happy Havoc can even be called sane. She's utterly and completely gone. That is why, among the brainwashing still working, even Makoto cannot talk no jutsu her, despite him being ultimate hope. Let's talk about AI Junko now. She is a little different from Junko we see in Danganronpa 1, despite being created during the killing game, isn't she? Well, that is because she is partially free from all the brainwashings and her traumas. I say partially, since AI Junko was based on the original traumatized and brainwashed Junko, but still, AI shouldn't be as corrupted as the real thing, right? I'd even say that AI Junko is more real than the girl we see in the finale of Danganronpa 1. And you know what her master plan is? Sorry. An ultimate form of escapism, creating her Junkolandia. She says it's for the goal of inflicting despair, but no matter how you look at it, it's just an attempt of escaping from the despair-induced world she created, escaping from society, escaping from relationships, escaping from any responsibility. I am convinced that this was the real Junko's dream, since she's the ultimate runner after all, right? Thanks for listening, guys. As I said at the beginning, my English is far from perfect. I have problems with speaking my opinions out loud. And I'm also kinda sick, so I was coughing here and there. But I still hope you enjoyed it. Please share your comments, share your opinions. And also one little thing, when reading out loud, I've noticed that I've made a little mistake in my essay. I kinda messed up the timeline. Danganronpa 0 happens in the middle of Danganronpa 3, and in my essay I put it like it was happening after Danganronpa 3 completely. I tried to kinda fix it when reading it out loud, but you may kinda still have heard it. So yeah, it's a mistake on my part. I'm sorry for that. But I still hope you pretty much enjoyed this essay. And yeah, thank you. Have a nice day.